Alright everyone, we're back with Springheel here, and I'm going to show you how to use the new architectural models that came with the Dark Mod 2.05 and show you how to use them to create sort of a basic city street. So this is a basic city street where I'm not expecting the player to have a lot of gameplay. There's going to be no interiors, and we don't have to detail the buildings very much. They're mostly just going to be facades. You're going to see the side that faces you, but you're not going to be able to get around the buildings to see the other side. So the best way to think about that, I think, is to think of them as just long hallways. And that's kind of what I've created here already. So I've started off by creating a long box. You see, it's just a simple box. I've textured it with a portal sky texture, and I've already imported a portal sky, and this is under prefabs. I think it's nature skyboxes. It's called Springheel sky or something to that effect. And what that does is it's got a little camera in it, and it projects what the little camera inside that little room sees onto any brush that has a portal sky texture on it. And what's nice about it is it handles the seams. It will hide seams for you. You don't have to worry about adjusting anything. You could have a wall jut out into the middle, and as long as it's a portal sky, the computer will blend it all together so it looks perfectly natural to the player. So this is a nice thing in outdoor scenes to have behind everything else. And so what we're going to do, portal sky also seals, so this way we know that we're not going to have any leaks in this section as well. So what we're going to do is create a city street in front of these skybox brushes, and I've kind of planned out my spacing in advance. I've put this strip here, this brush, down just temporarily as an idea for how wide I want the road to be. Now, I'm not going to have the road perfectly straight. That wouldn't look very believable. But it's just there as a reference. So it's going to be 128 units thick, which is a decent size for a street back then. Most streets in a city like the Dark Mod setting would be quite cramped, except for the occasional really wealthy street that might have room for two carts to pass each other, but for the most part they're going to be quite cramped. So 128 is quite generous, and I'm going to leave 64 units on each side for a walkway. Now, they didn't really have sidewalks per se, but this is going to be just sort of a walkway and a bit of a storefront area where you can have barrels or crates or market stalls or things that kind of project out into the player's environment. And then the actual walls will start about here, and that leaves about 1/28 width for our buildings. So we'll see how this is going to work. I've put an AI in here just for reference, for scale, just to get a sense of how big everything is and whether that was enough room for a street. So let's get started. We're going to start with, I really haven't planned this out in advance. This is the way that I would do it if I was starting. I have an idea that I want the player to have come from this area through this wall, and I can decide how I want that later. Eventually this wall I'll cut a hole in it and it will lead somewhere. And we might even do an alternate method. Maybe there's a rooftop access, a door up here that will cut later. But I find it useful to think about this in terms of hallways, even when you're dealing outside or dealing with outside areas. So let's begin. So we're going to take some basic wall models. I'm not going to be using the Timber 1 set for everything, but it is a pretty good place to start. So we're going to start with sort of a default wall section, and we're just going to start placing things. So I want to flush up against there, and we're right along that line. Let's drop it down to the, it's not dropping it for some reason. Let's drop it down to the floor. I did just update Dark Radiant for the first time in years, so there may be a few times that things do not work exactly the way I want, although that skin problem I mentioned in the last video has been fixed, which is nice. Okay, so what we're going to do is let's just start with a first basic shop here. So clone, clone, let's make it a small little shop that is 3 modules wide, and then we will clone one more, and we'll make a... Actually, you know what? We won't do that right now. Let's just do the front. I've got an idea of what we can do for the next one. So here we go, and now this is not a very interesting setup, but right now we're just worrying about blocking in the shop. We're not worried too much about, oops, back up too far. We're not worried too much about what it's going to look like because we can swap these modules out later. So I think what I want to do is just go right up and make the second floor. So we're going to copy those again, clone them, and just move them up here. Now, one thing that I didn't do in the last video, and I'm going to show you how to do here, is to actually have these jut out quite a bit, because I like the idea of these cramped back streets with the buildings kind of jutting out in them and blocking out a lot of the lights. So we're going to jut forward here about, say, this far. And there are modules built specifically to support these upper rooms. So let's just leave these floating here for a minute. And we will go look for the spacers, the horizontal spacers. I actually didn't call them horizontal. In some sets I called them horizontal. Here I just called them spacers and corner spacers. But you see, these are spacers, and what they are basically are supports that are meant to support something that's jutting out. There's one, and then there's one that comes with a hanging rope by default, so you can mix and match just to add some visual interest quite easily. There's also a few other different types of supports. I believe there's another, there are horizontal spacers. These are used in slightly different ways. I'll show you those later. Let's pick just the regular default spacer here and put it in. Now we'll move this so that it kind of goes into the module. It overlaps just a little bit, and these are designed, if you notice, they're exactly the same width as the wall module, and you can clone them again and line them up, and they snap together, so you can make a row of these. So we could do something like that. Oops. And then we'll select these, and we will put them, you can either have them rest right on top here if you want, or you can bring them down in front, which is what I think I'm going to do. So I'm going to bring that in front, back it up so that it overlaps. Now the sides here, you can actually leave them and they're visible. They don't look great in the editor because there's a shadow texture there, but they are okay to be visible, but I think I'm going to put a wall there. So we'll put these just like that. Now, this is now jutting out, and so when we're down on the street and we look up, you're going to see that this kind of juts out into the area, and that creates a lot of visual interest. I find flat walls tend to be quite boring, and they don't look as organic as the buildings that kind of stick out like this. Now, this might be overkill. We might decide, especially if we're going to have a door, that we get rid of one of these. But if we get rid of it, we can do that in the next step. We're still right now just kind of blocking in the basic shape. So what do we do about the side here? It kind of depends what building's going to go next. And all I know is that I don't want a perfectly horizontal wall of buildings down here, because again, it's not very organic. It doesn't look believable. Cities back in the time period where the dark mod takes place would have been much more uneven and imperfect and sort of built on top of each other. So we're going to have things that stick out here. But what I will do, let's pretend that this was going to be a corner, just so you can see how to do it. So what we'll do is we need to have, we could put a full wall here, could do that, and a full wall will just stick back. In fact, let's just see what that would look like. So space, corner, rotate, and we'll put it to where the, yep, so something kind of like that. And in fact, it doesn't quite go back all the way to the wall, but we could do something like this. And then if you remember from the last episode, the last video, we have to do something with this, because otherwise there's going to be a gap there that players will see. And this is where you would probably want to use a corner spacer. Now, probably you could use one that has these top and bottom, the feet on it, but this might also be a good place for the one that has no feet on it. So you can put that there, move it down like that, and you just have to position it so that it covers both ends like that. And there you go. And the player will never really notice that that's a separate piece, and even if they do, it just looks like it's a much thicker beam, which is not unrealistic for there to be on the corner of a building. So you could certainly do that, and then we could just do this, copy that, and we could have this go right outside the box. Now there would be one problem with that. You see this little angle here, this little backwards L shape. This is the origin of the model. This is where if you rotate it, it rotates around this origin. I don't know if it was such a good idea to put the origin so far away from the model. I originally did that for a reason, but I don't know if it's actually a valid reason. But one thing it does do is that you have to make sure that this is inside your sealed map. So right now, if I were to zoom out, this is now floating outside the box, and so that would cause an error. Now you could, there's two ways to fix that. I could take this brush, and I could just make this brush bigger. And now, oops, now it's inside a brush. And so the engine won't complain about that. That would be the easiest way to fix it. The other thing that I could do is, instead of using a full wall, there are half wall models. And since I want to show off the different models, why don't we use a half wall here instead? So there's walls. There's a wall, there's an empty wall, and what that has is the wooden frame, so it will snap and align the texture to any other wall piece, but it's perfectly empty. And what this is for is if you want to create a wall that the player can climb through, or you want to create your own door, or you want to create something that is unique, you can still keep the frame so it matches up with the other modules, but you can just create your own brush to fit in this area. Let's say you wanted to create a wall with a secret door in it. You can't do that with the existing modules, but you could do that with this piece. So that's what that's for. The half walls are meant to fill in areas where things jut out. So if we take one of those and rotate this like this, we can kind of overlap that. These ones have to overlap a little bit. They don't snap quite the same way the other ones did because they're half walls, they're not as big, but you can overlap them quite easily and you can have something kind of like that. So I could use a half wall there, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to leave this here because I know that we're not actually going to see this corner anyway. I have plans for this. Okay, so now what about the roof? Whoops, I keep backing up a little too far there. Okay, so what about the roof here? Well, we have a few options. I have 3 roof pieces created, and there's one that is 1 unit wide, there's one that's 2 units wide, and one that's 3 units wide. So we could have a choice here. We could put a giant 3, well, let's see what it looks like. Let's put a giant 3 unit roof. So that's roof 384. Now it's only the face, which means it does not have an actual roof on it, which means we would have to build the roof with brushes. So maybe let's not use that one. How about we use this one? How about we use a 2 unit wide roof, and it comes with roofs already built in, which is handy. So I'll just hit OK. We'll move that out and we'll move it up. Now if you notice, the roof comes already with a whole bunch of supports on it, so it's already built to jut out from this wall. So if you you can decide exactly how you want to space it out. I'm going to bury the supports into the wall a little bit, You can sort of adjust that to taste. You just want to make sure there's not an obvious gap. So we could do something like that. I'm just going to hide this wall so I can keep backing up and give you a better view. There. Okay, so we have something like that now. Now what about here? Well, let's put a smaller roof there. And here, let's put one with a window just to make it a little more interesting. So rotate it, move it up. And again, we'll just line it up so it's the same height. It's got supports as well, so we'll put the supports in about the same spot. And we'll do something like that. And now we have that kind of interesting building there already. Or at least the top is fairly interesting. And then we could add extra things to it, like a little chimney here. Why not? Now, not everything you want to use is going to be in the module sets. Sometimes you have to go outside them. So I've created, where was the metal one? This one actually, anytime you see a module or model that has the prefix Timber 01, then you know that it's been built to work with the Timber 01 set. It uses the same textures and, if necessary, has the same skins. So this brick is the same brick used in the Timber 01 set. So I'm just going to use that. Why not? And we'll just move it up just enough. Maybe rotate it this way so that it's buried into the wood. We don't have to go into too much detail because I don't expect the player to ever get up there. So we'll just do that. There. So now we got an interesting little skyline there. Now, what do we do with the walls? Because the walls right now are a little boring. So I think since this is a shop, it's going to need a door. So let's take this, and here's where it gets quite easy. You simply select whatever you want to replace that with. Now, if I wanted this to be a door the player could go in, I'd use this one. I'd have to use an empty door. If I don't care if the player goes in it, if it's just for show, if it's not a real door, I have two other doors I can choose from. Also, there is an empty door like this, where you can put your own door in it. I guess there's two empty doors where you can put your own door in it. And then there's something called an empty door back. If you notice, these two both have a door frame already sized out for you to use. So does this one. That's another thing I have to apologize for. I did not notice until I'd already made the majority of the models that they, for some reason, default to showing you the back of them in Dark Radiant. And you have to turn them around every time. I don't know why that is. But these come with door frames in them already. This one does not, so you can put your own door frame in there, or you can use it on the opposite side if you want the players to be able to pass through a door. Maybe I'll get a chance to show you that. But since I don't care if the players actually go in, I'm just going to use this door. And so it's got steps right built into it. Now, one thing you see right away is that these kind of look like they're in the way. So let's get rid of those. And that gives us enough room. Also, if you look underneath, you see that where we have these, everything's filled in. There's no gap, so we don't have to even put a wall in there. Now, if we're going to delete this because we need to be able to get through the door, then we'd actually have to put a brush here. So there's occasions where you do have to fill in gaps with a brush, but it's not very hard to do. You make a brush of the right size. If you don't know what texture the wood is, you can look at one of the models. If you go to choose model, see how it tells you right here what the textures are, so you know that this is rough wood, dark brown, dull. So if you go to media and down to wood and boards and rough wood, dark brown, dull. If it has NS, that means no shadow. You generally don't want to use that because then light can go through. So let's select this and apply to selection, and that's not bad. So make sure it's not jutting out anywhere that you can see. It's not really going to matter to the player too much. This is going to be in shadow, and they're not going to really see that this stops here and stops here. If you really are concerned about that, you could always put a little piece of trim here. In fact, I have a model that could work for that, so why not use it? Bracing. The bracing model can be used anytime you need to place. It might actually be a little big for this. Yeah, you know what? Yeah, you could use that there, but I don't think I'm going to bother. I don't think players are going to notice this. So it just depends how much you care about that. I think when we go and look at it in game, you'll see that no one would ever notice. Okay, so now we could decide that we want to put windows down here, but I think that's okay. Let's just put some windows up here. So we have what look like two separate rooms here, so why don't we make these two windows and leave that one the way that it is. So let's go to entity. Oh, I've got to choose model first. And let's see what we got here. Where are our windows? Again, I'm going to turn around. We could have a shop that's closed up for the night, but why don't we use one where the shutters are open, just to make it a little bit more interesting. So we'll put that there, and then we've got our model set down here, so we can just click there and hit click. Now these two might overlap. These two, I don't know if they would hit each other or not. Actually, it looks okay. If that bothers you, you can switch to one that's closed, but I'm going to leave them like that just for the heck of it. And up here, since we're using this texture already quite a bit, I'm going to make this one slightly more interesting. Just add a little bit of visual interest there. And let's take, nope, not wall number 4. Let's do wall number 1. There. And one last thing, just because it's easy. Let's do a skin. So again, we don't get the skin option unless you type skin in there. Choose skin, and I want to, what would look good here? Let's put some stone on the bottom level. That looks good. And then once we've selected the skin once, we can select any other and just hit that. There. Now look how quick we have a pretty cool looking building already set up. And you could very easily, in fact, let's do it. Let's just draw a brush all around here. And oops. And then we'll go up to here, select all inside brush, click, space to clone, and I could just move this building all the way down here. And in fact, I can rotate this building, and because all of the brushes are all axis, have the same alignment on the axis, they will all rotate together. They won't fly apart. So if I wanted to, if I didn't care very much, and I just needed to fill some areas, I could just easily clone this around the city and use it over and over and over again. In fact, maybe I'll do that for the other side of the street. Maybe down here, I will use that one. And I'll put it about, say, there. But I'm going to change it around a little bit, just so it's not quite so recognizable. And this, again, can be done really easily. Let me hide this wall as well. So, for example, we don't want it to look exactly the same, so let's take, we will take this and make this not a door. Let's just make it back into a regular wall. No, let's make it, let's say that there's windows on the lower floor here. So let's take this one, model, and we'll apply it down there. Now it keeps the same skin. And up here, let's maybe take this and put it over here. And oh, what the heck, let's put it all the way across. Say there's no windows there. And let's rotate these around so that maybe we have this over here and this over here, and we'd better make them look a little bit different as well. So let's put a texture on them, or skin rather. So I'm going to just take this skin, why don't we just apply it to everything? And that can be a big stone building. I feel like it should have a window up here. Let's use one we haven't used yet. How about a covered window? And then we'll use the same, so we've got one, we'll use it over here. Okay, there. Now, oh, better move that chimney. In fact, well, let's put the chimney on the small one, why not? Is that going to look ridiculous? Yeah, that might be a little bit too big for that, so let's move it back over here. And is it going to stick out? Yeah, okay, good. Now, look what we've done here. So with that much work, barely any, we have created a building that if players were walking past would not look immediately, obviously the same. It is going to look like a different building. And you can use that trick anywhere where it doesn't really matter. There's places where the player is not going to be spending a lot of time. It's not a key road in the mission. It's sort of a throwaway space that the player just has to move through, or maybe just maybe somewhere the player can't even go. It's just a road that gives a sense of depth that's behind a gate or something that's inaccessible to the player. That copy and paste method is something you can use very, very easily. We forgot to put the skin on the side here, so if we're going to be able to see that side, select the skin and paste. And then we've got that there. And that is all there is to it. One thing that I would probably do if I was doing this for real is I would put one side of the building on, or sorry, one side of the street on one layer and the other side on another layer so that you can turn them on and off and so they don't get in the way when you're looking at them. Alright, I think that's a good place to stop for now, and next time we'll take a look at arches and maybe take a look at the plain stone modules as well.